We love talking to this guy, Lex McMahon, the head of Titan FC. He is joining us here. They got another card coming up on Friday, Titan FC 60, headlined by a bantamweight championship. Danny Sabatello against Raymond Ramos. Are you excited for this one, Lex? You know, you got a championship fight going head to head. Have you tried to get these guys together before? It says it up.
Yeah, there's been a couple times they've been set to fight, and actually they were set to fight on our last card, but you know, as we were putting it together in the midst of the pandemic, a lot of guys hadn't been training. And, you know, Ray said yes initially, and then, you know, he pulled out because he wasn't comfortable that he'd gotten adequate training to fight, you know, a fight like Danny on such short notice without a full camp. But when I went back to Ray, you know, for this fight and for a title fight, he was all in. So I think it worked out for him.
Now, with Danny, he seems like a pretty big personality on the Instagram, and you know, the double birds, the cameras all the time, and in his style. So, what do you make?
I'm pretty sure this is how Danny shakes hands. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like it. So, like, is he one of these guys you think like not only has the talent, but kind of has maybe that personality that people are either going to want to see or boo or whatever, that kind of that X factor that might happen?
You know, man, here's the thing. Danny's really charismatic. He's a great kid. He really is. But that's kind of him. I mean, he plays it up a bit, but that is also his personality. He is talented. I think he still needs to grow a bit more in the sport, but when his talent and his persona kind of hit that perfect intersection, I think he's going to be a real beast and a real marketable fighter. And he's getting there. I mean, I think, you know, I wouldn't be putting him in a position. This is going to be his second opportunity for a title fight. I believe in him. I think he's very talented, and I think he has a bright future in front of him. So, you know, yeah, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be marketable at the next level for sure.
How was doing the event last time? This, you know, you guys I think it was a few weeks ago. You guys were back in the midst of the pandemic. How was dealing with all of that? Is there anything that you've learned or is new in the shakeup now? As you guys trying to put on your second event?
You know, I was happy just to be back in business, man. And doing it was hard. You know, the safety, putting together a safety plan when really nobody else but the UFC had done anything was a challenge. And, you know, here in South Florida, you know, we're in the epicenter for Florida. Yes. So everybody's very cautious in terms of, you know, putting on events, even in a live event with no audience. Still want to make sure everybody's safe. So there's a lot of scrutiny, and I think, you know, people are concerned about the optics to make sure that the perception of it is that, you know, we're doing things the right way. And it's almost, you know, to be honest, it's almost like the perception is more important than the reality to a certain degree. Because I just think nobody wants to get it wrong, you know. Right. But you know, we're doing good, man. You know, the safety plan we put in place last time was very successful, and the government officials, and it's like an alphabet soup of folks that I had to have sign off on this thing. They all said, "Hey, great job," and so we're just implementing the same safety plan we used last time. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve this time. But the main thing is we're now going to be in the lovely Intercontinental Miami down on Biscayne Bay, as opposed to MMA Masters, which, listen, I'm so thankful that the guys at MMA Masters, you know, gave us a place to hang our hat for that first show. But, man, it was hot. It was brutal in there. And the athletes that fought, funny is Rami Hamed, who fought in the card, sitting across from me right now. He's just shaking his head. He's like, yeah, dude, it was hot. So, you know, now it's going to look like a normal Titan show, you know, with the big LED boards, all the bells and whistles. And, you know, we're going to be in the grand ballroom of the Intercontinental Hotel. And we're going to be helping to showcase, you know, their reopening. That's really what's happening right now is, you know, as they're trying to get back on to a place where they're having, you know, people come in, they want to tell the story that they're doing it the right way. They're safe, they're clean, you know, all those things. And so it's worked out. It's a great spot for us to be, and I'm excited. I think the fighters are all excited that they, you know, are going to have a great place to compete.
You guys are still doing that old school. It looks like everybody's talking about the new test. It looks like you're still doing the old in the nostril, touching the brain thing I saw on Instagram. That's
yeah, it's that one clears your sinuses, man. It's So what's been approved by the Miami-Dade mission is the nasal swab test. So whatever's new and coming out, it hasn't been approved for our safety plan. So I don't want to deviate from it because I want to make sure that we follow everything to the T, and that we know that we did things the right way.
How different, I guess, is a guy who's running an association, a league with a bunch of athletes? How, from your standpoint, where you say it's almost how it looks, not almost how it is. Like, it does feel. I'm trying, like, as a person who's following sports left and right. When like Rudy Gobert first tested positive for Corona, it was just like, the whole world's freaking out. Now, like, you kind of got to get to a point in sports where you're going to know this is the new reality. Guys are going to test positive, and you kind of just got to figure out the next step. So do you feel that, like, that things are, it's more like, all right, this is kind of how we got to react to it rather than freak out about it, just kind of just handle it better? Or because
Yeah, I mean, listen,
who knows how long this is going to go on?
Yeah, exactly, bro. I mean, I think it was the great unknown, so there was a lot of knee-jerk reactions. I mean, listen, like you said, you've got NBA shutting down a game in the middle of a game.
Yeah.
Things are gone sideways, and I think that was unprecedented. That had never occurred before. And so it really created a shockwave that affected more than the sports world. It affected the broader world. Because I think once everybody saw it happening, at such a big level for sports, that they're like, wow, this is real. But the reality is, it's been month after month of this, and living in quarantine, and, people trying to figure out, what's real, what's not real, what's the most effective manner to deal with it. There's a certain realization that at the end of the day, man, you got to get back to work. Society has to function. And you can't have knee-jerk reactions. You have to have educated, well-thought-out plans that you implement. And so I think that's the phase that we're entering in now. Is there's a realization that this is the new normal for the foreseeable future, and we have to function. So now let's just figure out how to get it done. And I think people are very resourceful, and they have a great level of resilience. And you're starting to see that in society now, where people are like, okay, man, let's whatever we got to do to get back to work, let's make it happen. Resume our lives.
I wanted to ask you, coming up at UFC 251, you got two guys in the main event who you're close to. You've had, Gilbert fight on your cards. Kamaru's called your cards for a long time. They're now squaring off. They were teammates at Hard Knocks 365, where you guys, is kind of the hub of where you guys do everything there at Extreme Action Park and all that. What do you make of this, man? It's two guys who obviously know each other very well, and Christian, like, is this going to be a weird one for you with two guys that you like squaring off in the main event?
I'm excited for it because I've seen them spar, and it could go literally. I mean, anybody who says definitively that one guy's got this hasn't watched them spar, hasn't watched them compete together. It's back and forth every day when they train together, and I would be lying. Like, no matter what happens, I'm going to feel bad for the guy who doesn't win, because I'm friends with them both, and I'm actually very close with them. But it's a business. There's nothing personal about this. If you talk to either guy, neither guy feels disrespected. Neither guy feels like, oh, I don't want to fight you because you're my teammate. Like, I think Kamaru understands that there's a moment in time for every athlete, and Gilbert is at that point where it's his time. And if he doesn't take advantage of it, then something could change. And all of a sudden, maybe he takes a fight he shouldn't take and he loses. And, so Kamaru's a businessman in terms of this sport, and he understands that this is Gilbert's time. And, they're training separately now. And when they're going to fight, and they're going to beat the crap out of each other. And, it's going to be a close fight. I really don't think it's going to be something that is going to be – I think it's going to go all 5 rounds. And I think both guys are going to walk out probably a little bit older for the experience, to be honest. But they're going to hug afterwards, and they're going to continue to be friends. I mean, this is, I think, a great example of why this is not brawling like it used to be back in the day, that this is a sport. And in sport, people compete. Doesn't mean you're not friends. Doesn't mean you don't respect one another. It's just this sport is very physical and intimate,
Did you think Gilbert was going to be this good? This rise has been pretty crazy from him.
Almost meteoric, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, Gilbert's always been great, but I think the move up in weight class allowed him to not spend so much time focusing in on the weight cut and just focusing in on getting better. And I think once he did that, the pieces started to come together for him, because mentally he wasn't concerned about how he was feeling and what the weight was going to be. He could just focus in on executing the game plan that his coaches have put in place. And Henry Hooft and Greg Jones and Tommy Barzini, they do a tremendous job of putting together game plans that are simple but very effective. And that's what's going to be interesting, is both guys are coming into this having had the benefit of that type of coaching for so long. Henry's not going to corner either guy. And so now, they're going to have a little bit of that ring generalship that won't be present for them. So they're going to have to, lean back on their other corners, but also I think on what they've learned from Henry, because Henry's a tremendous leader as a coach. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, man. But Gilbert, I think, has found his time, and I don't know who's going to win, man. I would hate to pick, somebody in this situation. I would say I wouldn't want to fight either one of them, because Gilbert has found, I think, his time, and he's confident in himself. He's world-class in jiu-jitsu, like world class. And his striking has really come up where he's developed power, and he's, his technique is very crisp now. And Kamaru's just a problem,
Yeah. It's got to be weird for him too, because you think you have all these, the Colby stuff been so personal, the winning from Woodley. You think you're set up for this Masvidal super match where you guys are squaring off at the Super Bowl. I was there that day when that was.
Yeah.
You think like it's all fall in front of you. Then like out of nowhere, oh no, your teammate. That's who you're going to be end up. Like he probably never could have saw that coming.
Yeah, and I think that's probably right. I mean, everybody, I think Gilbert's opportunity kind of came at the expense of Cush's big super payday fight, because when that didn't materialize, the next fight that made sense was Gilbert, because he was the guy on the right trajectory, ascending, and he just coming off this big win. And is it a big money fight? No, it's not, because people are excited to see Gilbert, but Gilbert's not George Masvidal. He's not Conor McGregor. He's none of these guys that are the bigger money fights. And so it's tough to fight a guy that's a monster the way Gilbert is and have it not be the same big money fight that it could have been. I think psychologically that's a challenge that he's going to have to get over.
I wanted to ask you about this because you have been on both sides of this. And I heard Brendan Schaub talk about this on his podcast recently, where he was talking about you handling one of his fight negotiations when he was in the car, and you didn't let the guy know.
You know how many questions I've gotten about this one, bro?
I mean, that's fine, but like, what? I guess fight pay has been like the big topic, I guess, over the last few weeks because
Sure.
the big stars are disgruntled. How do you see this? Like, I'm sure you've been on both sides of it. You've managed fighters and you've had to do those negotiations, I'm sure, where you're trying to get your fighter the most money. You've talked about Dana White and everybody hitting him up for stuff. So what do you kind of make from your scope of all of this, of where the UFC is with its business, its high profile guys, and as a guy who has been on that side of negotiating for fighters, when is the time when you go and you ask and know whether or not you're asking for too much or it's going to set the company off in a bad way?
I think it comes down to a philosophical approach, Brendan. My approach has always been one of collaboration, understanding my athletes' value, and understanding when their moment of time is, and not overvaluing or overstating it. If the problem is, some guys are very short-sighted and they say, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to try to get as much money as I can right now. The problem is, if you go in and do that, and then you go on a downturn quickly, which happens in the sport, you've now priced yourself to be too expensive and then therefore expendable. So there's a sweet spot where you've got to maximize your dollar, but you've got to say, listen, I get you've got to run a business. I get you've got to, pay a bunch of other people. My value right now, like, I always looked at data. My background is venture capital, right? So I looked at data and I say, okay, my athlete is being paid presently below the competitive set, below his peer group. I need him to be right in the pack with his peer group. If he's truly a special case, then I want him to set the standard. But if he's a guy who's right there and, you know, he's a legitimate top 5 guy, well, let's pay him as a top 5 guy. Does he have to be a paid number 1 well above and beyond? That's probably too much of a reach. So I always try to put myself, you know, using a business lens, the way, you know, when I was evaluating companies in venture capital, you know, you always have to kind of create a win-win scenario. And by doing that, I think you build a lot longer term relationship that you can continue to go back and negotiate. Does it matter if I get all of my money in one contract or if I make my money over the course of multiple contracts? At the end of the day, we're looking at aggregate dollars and building in safeguards when there are unexpected contingencies that occur, right? So I think it's about being a good negotiator is about being fair and putting yourself in the other person's shoes and saying, hey, these are what's important to me, and then supporting it with data. Not one time when I sat down with Dana has he said, okay, you're asking for something that's grounded in all these facts. I don't want to give it to you. If I could show him, and it's not easy because, you know, not all of UFC data, you know, pay-wise is released. But if you dig, you can find it and you can make some assumptions, and chances are you'll be able to figure it out pretty right on. I would always walk into negotiations with a spreadsheet, and I'd sit down with them. I'm like, look, man, my guy's here. This is where objectively he is as a fighter. Let's pay him as that. As soon as I can show that, and I can show like a guy like Stefan Struve, who, you know, at the time we were negotiating his last contract, you know, he was in the top 3 or 4 of like all the various categories, from wins, finishes, all those fight bonuses. Oh, it's a pretty easy sell at that point to get a big pay raise, because you can show that over a 10-year history, this is what the guy's done, and therefore his value is X, and Dana listens. And I think that really any good business person does. I think what you see happening now is, and the fighters aren't wrong, this is a moment in time where the UFC's got to put on fights, and they need their big stars to put on the fights. If you're going to ask for money and you're taking a more short-term view of things, as opposed to building like a partnership with somebody, but like, hey, I got to maximize my dollars right now because I don't know what's going to happen. Leveraging at a time when you know the UFC is maybe a little weak, and because they have to put on their shows and they've got to make sure they have their stars. I get why some of the stars are doing it, man. I do, but it's not the approach I would take, and it's not the approach I would suggest. But there's multiple ways to skin the cat.
So tell us what you got. You got Titan FC 61 coming up Friday. Can fans go at the Intercontinental, or is it just still on UFC Fight Pass? Is that the way to watch it? So it's
still UFC Fight Pass. Unfortunately, you know, some of Florida is entered into phase 2, and you know, the commission has allowed fans to come into certain venues, but not in South Florida. Right now, it's basically whatever the various counties say is what we have to abide by. So we're doing our shows down in Miami-Dade or up in Broward, depending on where we are. Both places are like, nah, you can't have fans. Not yet, man. And so, you know, I haven't even thought about bringing fans back yet. I just want to continue to do shows. Last time I was happy that we got our show up and running, that we got some fighters back to work. This time I'm looking to really get back to a normal Titan show in terms of putting on great fights that are really produced well and look great. And then we're going to be doing it, you know, I think that'll be kind of the formula going forward, month after month through the end of the year. And, you know, when something big happens and, you know, we can have 100% fan base back in, then we'll go back to our normal shows. But for now, I think this is what makes the most sense, because I can guarantee that I'm able to do the shows. If I start adding in all these other variables, people start looking at it and scrutinizing it a lot more, and it becomes harder to guarantee that we will be able to do the shows.
Well, I appreciate the time, man. Best of luck this weekend. Another successful show. Watch on UFC Fight Pass, everybody. And we'll do it again, man. Have a good one.
All right, brother. Thank you so much, man.
All right,
cheers.
Alex.